If you felt stuck trying to lose weight, you're not alone. Enter Weight Loss by Hers. It's designed to support you in reaching your goals. And Hers now offers access to an affordable range of FDA-approved GLP-1 medications, including the Wegovy pill and the Wegovy pen. With Wegovy at Hers, lose up to 20% or more of your body weight when combined with diet and exercise. It helps you regulate your appetite, eat less, and keep weight off. Plus, Wegovy is the first GLP-1 available in a pill, so there are no needles needed. Everything is 100% online through Hers. You'll connect with a licensed provider who will determine if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your medication is delivered right to your door. No insurance necessary. And it doesn't stop there. Weight Loss by Hers goes beyond medication by offering access to 24/7 messaging with your care team and tons of in-app lifestyle and nutrition tips like recipes, meal plans, fitness videos, sleep content, and more. Even better, with a range of affordable GLP-1 options, Hers makes it simple to find an approach that fits your needs and your budget if eligible. You'll get a treatment plan personalized to you and unlimited dosage changes as needed. It's weight loss designed to work with your life. Ready to reach your goals? Visit forhers.com/women to get personalized, affordable care that gets you. That's FORHERS.com/women. forhers.com/women. Weight Loss by Hers is not available in all 50 states. Wegovy is the registered trademark of Novo Nordisk A/S. To get started and learn more, including important safety information, Wegovy clinical study information, and restrictions, visit forhers.com.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
Welcome to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast, the show that explores the background of Tolkien's amazing world from the very beginning. So here's a question for you. What was it like when you had to leave your home for the first time? And I'm not talking about going away on a trip. I'm not talking about going off to school for the first time. I'm talking about leaving, moving out. Maybe it was during your childhood and your parents decided that you were going to move to another location and live somewhere else. Or maybe you graduated from high school and decided to go off to college or university, and you didn't know exactly what that was going to be like. Or maybe you went off to the military. There are lots of different versions of this, but I have a feeling that almost all of us have been through this at some point in our lives. And for many of us, the scariest part is the unknown. What will it be like when you get there? Will you meet new people? Will you fit into the community? Are you going to find your place? But for Frodo, this is a very different kind of thing. And I have a feeling that what we're about to get into in chapter 3 is probably more analogous to something that Tolkien himself felt than most of us went through. When I decided to go away to college, I was already 1 year into my college education. I hadn't quite figured out what I wanted to major in, and I really didn't have a sense of what I wanted to study at all. And so I had the scholarships and I had support from my parents, but I spent that first year at a local community college. And I realized during that first year that I was ready, that 13th grade was plenty of high school for me. It was time to go off to an actual university somewhere. And so I left that following year and I doubled down and I got super invested in studying philosophy and religious studies. And I graduated top of my department because I was ready to go. But in that scenario, I wasn't being hunted by anything. There was no ticking clock. There was no reason I needed to get out of the house right away other than to start my life and to figure out what I was going to do with myself. But I was fortunate. I had the support from my family. I had a good education. I had scholarships. I had a lot of opportunities. And the hardest thing for me was making a decision, was figuring out what to do or what I really wanted. But not all of us are that fortunate. Some people get kicked out of their homes and some people have to go off to war. And I imagine that that was much more of the case for J.R.R. Tolkien himself. World War I was a problem. It was a huge deal. He lived in England. The future of Europe and the whole world was at stake. And he went off to war, knowing that he may not come back. And we've talked about this before. His closest friends did not survive the war. He himself suffered and had to be pulled off the front lines. I would imagine that looking from your place where you are, your safe place, your home, and looking forward into the unknown of being sent off to war is much more similar to what Frodo is going through in this chapter than what most of us have experienced. He knows he has to leave. He knows he has to go for a good reason, to serve, to protect the people that he loves. And yet, it's a very difficult decision to make because he knows as soon as he heads out of his front door, the dangers of the world will be right there with him. He's never experienced what he's going to have to deal with. He doesn't even know where his end destination is. And all of these things are probably analogous to what J.R.R. Tolkien experienced himself heading off to war. Again, I've lived a fortunate life. I have not had to go through that, but I know some of you have. And I cannot imagine how you manage to deal with the unknown and the dangers that the future will hold for you. And here we have Frodo in this situation right here in chapter 3. Not only does he have to leave his home, but he sells it to the very people he probably would least like to end up owning it. And that ends up becoming a problem by the end of the story, but we'll get there eventually. So keep this all in mind as we get through this chapter. And when we're looking at him being hesitant to leave, knowing the dangers of the ring, knowing the dangers of the forces of Mordor that are actively seeking to find the ring, keep this in mind. It's a lot easier from our perspective to think, well, Frodo, you better hurry up, than it is to be Frodo in this scenario. And I think that's something that Tolkien understood deeply. So let's get into it. Chapter 3. 3 is company. The very first line of chapter 3 is Gandalf saying, "You ought to go quietly and you ought to go soon." 3 weeks have passed. And in that time, we're told in that very first paragraph that Frodo had made no signs of getting ready to go. Now, you would imagine, having just read the previous chapter, that he probably would have started packing right away. He seemed very worried about everything that was going on, and Gandalf was telling him in no uncertain terms that the fate of his friends, his community, and probably the world rest on his shoulders. And we get this interesting conversation between Gandalf and Frodo. Frodo explains that it's actually difficult to do both, to go quickly and quietly. The last thing that he wants to do is to disappear. And Gandalf says, of course you mustn't vanish. And we're going to see something here as we get through this chapter. One of the things that Frodo is doing and seems to be leaning on is his experience seeing Bilbo do certain things. And this happens again and again in the story. Bilbo is the template. Frodo is following that template, but there are some ways in which he can't do this. For example, he saw what happened when Bilbo just disappeared after his 11th birthday. Now, of course, he physically disappeared. He put the ring on, but he also just left without any real moment's notice, just kind of left. And then everybody in the Shire was talking about it. The last thing Frodo wants is for everybody in the Shire to be talking about him. But of course, people are going to talk no matter what, so he has to give them something to talk about. He decides that he will leave in the autumn after our birthday. Our birthday meaning Frodo and Bilbo's birthday, because it's on the same day. And interestingly, this year is Frodo's 50th birthday, which is exactly the same age that Bilbo was when he first left the Shire on his adventure. And so we have another moment where this template matches up. Frodo is in some ways doing exactly what Bilbo did. But of course, Bilbo left on that adventure without a moment's notice either, and immediately headed out that next morning with the dwarves, and everybody talked about it. So Frodo, again, is learning from Bilbo's example, but yet changing things around a little bit. And he has time. It's the summer. So he decides, okay, I'll plan this out. We're going to spend a few months getting ready. And he'll come up with an excuse, a justification, something that makes sense to the people of the Shire. He decides, okay, when autumn comes, he knows that he's going to feel more like journeying, because that happens every year, because of Bilbo and his experience with Bilbo's story. The autumn feels like when you leave on a journey, which I find interesting because historically that would have been the least opportune time to leave on a long journey, because you would end up traveling through the winter, which is why many historically armies did not leave for combat in the fall, because they would have been inundated with bad weather. Most of the conflicts historically before the advent of, tanks and planes and things like that happened between spring and autumn during the summer months. It's also when armies would find more food available in the locations they were traveling through and pillaging in order to feed themselves. But that's not exactly what Frodo's planning to do here. In fact, Frodo isn't really sure at all about what his plan is to do here, and he and Gandalf discuss it. Gandalf says to make sure that you don't let out any hint of where you're going, and see that Sam Gamgee does not talk. If he does, I really shall turn him into a toad. That's a Gandalf joke, because of course he's not going to turn him into a toad. And Frodo, in this part of the discussion, explains to Gandalf that he doesn't really know where he's going to be going. And that basically that's a secret that will be kept safe, because he himself doesn't know the answer to it. And Gandalf reinforces the idea that he needs to leave the Shire, but that information should not be known until a great while after he's left. So whatever their plan is, that has to be covered. On top of that, the direction needs to be secret as well. People shouldn't know if you've headed north or east or south or west. That way, if somebody tries to follow you, they won't know what direction to go in. But Frodo is still confused at this point. He's like, I don't even know where to go. His example, Bilbo, knew where to go. The dwarves had a mission to go find treasure, as he puts it here. He says, Bilbo went to find a treasure, there and back again. But I go to lose one and not return as far as I can see. And you can see the hopelessness in this. He knows that he may never be able to return to the Shire because of how dangerous his mission is, but also how he wants to keep the Shire safe. Remember, they don't know what's going to happen with the ring. They don't know what they're going to do about it at all. If they will even brave Frodo going all the way to Mount Doom, he doesn't know that yet. We know how the story plays out, but Frodo doesn't know. And Gandalf doesn't know either. He says that quest may be for others. I do not know. At any rate, you are not ready for that long road yet. And this is an interesting part of this. Gandalf multiple times talks about how he doesn't know what the future holds, which is absolutely true. He kind of gets a sense of where the flow of time is going, the flow of fate is going on occasions. And usually as he gets closer and closer to a moment, you can kind of tell that he has a sense of that, but he can't predict the future. He doesn't have foresight. And on top of that, Gandalf is 100% sure that Frodo is not ready for that long road yet, which does give a little bit of foreshadowing that at some point he will be ready for that long road. So it's this fun combination of Gandalf not knowing, but this like literary foreshadowing kind of thing going on, even though Gandalf doesn't know. It's kind of fun. So they discuss where he's supposed to head. And the suggestion is made by Gandalf that, well, first you have to go towards danger, but not too rashly nor too straight, which is an interesting thing to say, but pretty much anywhere he goes will be towards danger. But then he says, if you want my advice, make for Rivendell. That journey should not prove too perilous, though the road is less easy than it was, and it will grow worse as the year fails. Now, he's referencing that as the year fails, meaning comes to an end, that it will become winter and traveling will become harder. But Rivendell is the kind of place that's close enough that Frodo could get there in due time before the year fails. But also, the use of the word fails here is interesting to me because he doesn't say as the year comes to an end or as winter arrives. Tolkien writes year fails. This is a literary device that sometimes authors use to very specifically choose words that set a tone. Now, if he had said, as the autumn comes to a close, or as winter arrives, there's something kind of neutral or maybe even positive, something arriving kind of feels like a nice thing. But instead he says the year fails. This is a downer. This is a word that has an inherent, almost negative bias to it. And that's the mood. It's creeping into the language as Frodo and Gandalf are both concerned about what the future will hold. But Rivendell is a positive thing in the midst of all of this, and it perks Frodo up. Remember, he's following in Bilbo's footsteps, and in this case, will literally be following in Bilbo's footsteps to go to Rivendell, which also works for us as the audience. Anybody who was familiar with The Hobbit will see the parallels here and will be excited to go back to a place that we are already familiar with, to go see the elves again. And we're not the only ones. He mentions that Sam would love to visit the elves as well and that he would be delighted. And I love this little bit here. He spoke lightly, but his heart was moved suddenly with a desire to see the house of Elrond Half-Elven and breathe the air of that deep valley where many of the fair folk still dwelt in peace. That may seem like a pretty obvious sentence, but there are a few things to unpack here. He spoke lightly, meaning kind of timidly, not really jumping out of his seat about it, but inside, his heart moved with a desire to see Elrond Half-Elven. Now, that is probably in large part due to Bilbo's stories and the fondness that Bilbo had for Elrond, but also because they're elves, and also the bringing up of elves is usually a positive thing. It's usually something that lifts the spirits. It is a reminder of the good things left in the world. And we're given a reminder here that those fair folk still dwell in peace. And that is the one thing that he is most worried about. This will be a sanctuary on his path because he knows the journey will not be full of peace. Now, for those of you who are primarily familiar with this story from the movies, then you've missed out on a lot of the I guess you could say the Hobbit and the Shire intrigue, the conflict internally with the Shire, the story of the scouring of the Shire, the extended end to this trilogy. And those parts of this story are very important, especially because they are important to Bilbo and Sam and Pippin and Merry and the rest of the hobbits. There is a reason why Tolkien spends so much time at the beginning of this story introducing other people, other families, other names. The Sackville Bagginses, primarily among all of them, play a bigger role than we would ever expect at this point in the story. And we will learn that as we get to the end of the story, the return to the Shire, the scouring of the Shire, and all of the conflicts that play out at that point. But for right now, we're getting a setup. We're both finding out what Frodo's plan is, but we're also, well, we're becoming sad to learn about the way that plan is going to play out. Remember, the Sackville Bagginses are not good people. They're thieves, and they try to manipulate people for their own interests. So when Frodo announces that he is going to sell Bag End, and it's the Sackville Bagginses who purchase it, there's something about that doesn't feel right? I mean, I don't know, maybe you're like me. Maybe when you read through this part of the book, you kind of, something drops in the middle of your stomach and you're like, oh no, they get Bag End? And like I said, things will play out a certain way in the long run. But for right now, we're already getting a glimpse of the things that Frodo will need to sacrifice in order to achieve what he needs to do. And so he sells Bag End. He packs up all of his stuff. And this creates rumors, but this is probably a better way to create rumor and to have people talk about him because it feels like it makes sense. People can figure this out, or at least think they can figure this out. The idea is that maybe he's running out of money, or maybe he just doesn't want to live there anymore because he's a weirdo, he's a Baggins, and he's more like the Brandybucks. And so if he's going to move out of Bag End, then it would make sense that he moves to Buckland to be near the rest of those relations where he better fits in. Now, we know that's not the case, but that's what everyone starts spreading as rumors to justify that this is what's going on. And this works in a few different ways. First of all, it gives them something that makes sense for them to tell rumors about. They can justify this. This isn't him just vanishing and them thinking something crazy and bigger is going on. Although there is speculation that Gandalf has something to do with this. But it gives them a foothold, a reasonable justification for why Frodo is doing something that would otherwise be very surprising. And he goes through with all the plans. We get this part right here where it says, as a matter of fact, with Merry's help, he had already chosen and bought a little house at Crick Hollow in the country beyond Buckleberry. To all but Sam, he pretended he was going to settle down there permanently. Now that means that Merry and Pippin, his closest friends, and his other friends who are going to help him pack up and move, all believe that this is actually what he's doing. That he's moving there and is planning to now live in Crick Hollow. The decision to set out eastwards had suggested the idea to him, for Buckland was on the eastern border of the Shire, and as he had lived there in childhood, his going back would at least seem credible. So this works on multiple levels. First of all, he knows he has to travel east. Secondly, he has family there. Third, he has previously lived in that area, so it would not be unreasonable for somebody to think that he would want to go back and live in a place where he originally grew up. How many of us do that? Talking about these moments where we leave home for the unknown and go out into the world. So many of us then return home later, or we go get a degree, or we go get a job, and then we find another job, and then we have an opportunity to take a job back in our hometown so we can live closer to our parents and our family. That sort of thing. Now, for Frodo, he's not moving back to his parents because they're not around anymore and Bilbo has left, so he's moving back to be closer to the rest of his relatives, which makes sense. Why does he need Bag End to begin with? It's a large place. He's just one hobbit. So this works for many different reasons, but it also introduces us to that location, which will become important as this story plays out. We learn a little bit more about Buckland. It's to the east. We learn a little bit about how to get there. It's noted a little bit later in the chapter that they're going to go over the Brandywine Bridge, which will become important later. So this both sets everything up for the people in the Shire to understand what's actually going on, but it also gives us a sense of where he's going and familiarity on some level with the locations that will be about to be traveled to. So it works for multiple levels. Kind of genius. But then we find out that Gandalf gets word about something that makes him concerned, and he needs to leave. And we know that this happens with Gandalf. This is something that happened a few different times in The Hobbit. This is something that works, again, on two different levels. First of all, it shows that Gandalf is an important person. He is juggling many responsibilities, and he can't just spend months of his days, I guess we'll just go with that, hanging out with Frodo and helping him pack in order to get him to the point where he's ready to start moving somewhere. Although that would make a lot of sense. But something comes up, something important enough to pull his attention somewhere else where he needs to be. And it isn't revealed yet. So we're not going to talk about that yet because it's not necessarily part of what's happening in this moment, but we'll get there. But secondly, this plays another role. This is like when you watch like a superhero movie and one of the superheroes is really, really powerful. I don't know, I'm thinking like Marvel with like Thor or the Hulk, one of these characters that is just really, really powerful, and yet they're not able to be in the moments where they would be most useful because that would totally ruin the film. So they have to go off on some sort of side journey, or the character just, in the case of the Hulk, the character just won't come out. He just refuses to show up. That sort of thing. That's kind of what we're dealing with here. If Gandalf had been able to stay here and be with Frodo the entire time, then the tension would never ramp up. We would feel like things are too safe. This is the same thing that happens when Bilbo and the dwarves enter Mirkwood. Gandalf leaves. So it makes us worried. There is a good justification for it, but it makes us worried. But if Gandalf never left, then the heroes in that story, primarily Bilbo, would never have been able to take responsibility and solve the problems and face the dangers by themselves. Those are the things that are necessary for the hero to progress, for him to become ready for that long journey. It is this journey that Frodo's about to leave on that will make him strong enough to see this through to the end. And if he could lean on Gandalf the entire way, that would never happen. Now, Gandalf doesn't give this as a justification. In fact, I don't think Gandalf is choosing to do this in order to make Frodo stronger. If Gandalf had his way, he probably would have stayed with Frodo, but he has to leave. He says, "I have heard something that has made me anxious and needs looking into. If I think it necessary after all for you to get off at once, I shall come back immediately, or at least send word." So he's going to be paying attention. He's going to try to stay in communication, but he really has no sense of what he's going to discover and how this is going to play out. In the meanwhile, stick to your plan, but be more careful than ever, especially of the ring. Let me impress on you once more, don't use it. Now, this impresses upon Frodo, again, not to use it, which will become important once he's off on the road, of course. He also says something else. "I may be back any day," he said. "At the very latest, I shall come back for the farewell party. I think, after all, you may need my company on the road." So his plan is to be there with Frodo. His plan wasn't to leave him and let Frodo level up on his own in video game language, but he doesn't return. Through the rest of the summer, Frodo and his friends start packing everything up, and his friends get together. We're told that Fredegar Bolger and Falco Boffin join him along with Pippin and Merry, and they help him out. They pack his stuff. Time goes by. They continue packing his stuff. They send off some carts to go to the new location with his things. And time passes, and Gandalf doesn't return. He doesn't even send a letter. And then the day of the birthday dawns. Thursday, his birthday morning, dawned as far and clear as it had long ago for Bilbo's great party. This is a positive thing. This comes across, again, like Bilbo's template. It feels exactly like that day. And that was a good sign. The weather being a positive thing is usually a good sign, not just because it's comfortable, but because it feels like the world is in support of what's happening in that moment, that sort of thing. But Gandalf doesn't return. And the other hobbits, remember, Sam's the only one who knows what's actually going on here. And so they celebrate. Frodo kept some of his furniture there, just a little bit of a dining room set and some wine. And he's not in the best mood, but they celebrate. And during this celebration, Frodo is torn. He's wondering how he's going to tell his friends that he is going to leave for good and may not ever return. But they don't know this, and their spirits are high. The four younger hobbits were, however, in high spirits, and the party soon became very cheerful in spite of Gandalf's absence. So even though Frodo is kind of in this dark, concerned mood, as becomes very common for what he has to go through, his friends are still there. They're raising his spirits and they're raising glasses to toast both Frodo and Bilbo. And again, we're reminded about Bilbo. This is something they do every year. It says in the final paragraph we're going to cover in this episode, when they had sung many songs and talked of many things they had done together, they toasted Bilbo's birthday, and they drank to his health and Frodo's health together, according to Frodo's custom. Then they went out for a sniff of air and glimpse of the stars, and then they went to bed. And remember, every time we get nature, the sniff of the air, and especially a glimpse of the stars, that is a positive thing. That's a reminder of the good things in this world. And then they went to bed. Frodo's party was over, and Gandalf had not come.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
It is getting close to the end of the month, which means VIP patrons. We have another patron chat coming up on Sunday, the 31st at 8 p.m. Eastern time. I don't know what time that is for you because everyone lives in different time zones, but come join me. If you are one of our VIP patrons, or if you would like to be, you can help pick out the topic. I have a post up on the Patreon right now asking for topic suggestions from all of the VIP patrons, and I'd love to have you join us. The last one was great. We only had 2 people join us, but there's a bunch of you. I'd love to get as many of you together as possible and just have some fun talking about whatever topics you guys enjoy. So join me, be part of that, and share some ideas. I'm down to talk about whatever you guys would like. So in today's bonus episode, I'm going to be going into more details about Tolkien and going off to war and a little bit more on the timeline. I know we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but I thought this would be interesting to go back into in light of Frodo's experiences here and see how many of these similarities there are, because there are some, right? Like, it seems like this was a very personal kind of experience for him with somebody like Frodo having to go off and on his adventure and all of that. So as usual, if you are interested in joining us on the bonus episode, you can sign up on the Patreon, patreon.com/LOTR Lorecast. And welcome to our newest patrons, Stephen G and Sky Grace. Thank you for your support and for being here. I really do appreciate it. And we have to shout out all of our other patrons. But before we do that, thank you to everyone who supports the show and shares it with your friends. In fact, that's the best way you can help me out, is simply sharing the show with your friends and family. And if you want to leave a review, 5-star reviews get read out on future episodes on Apple, or you can comment on Spotify, or you can join us on the Discord. You know how all this stuff works. I talk about it every week. But last thing here, let's shout out all of our VIP members. Thank you everyone for your support. Fulcrum, David S., Daniel Nightweaver, Capenna, Richard J., TJT, AK Music Lover, Barney D., Azel Razzle, Blade of Andoril, Lori B., Norwegian Myar, Mason Weathertop, Jezer, Gimli Break, Divine Madman, that one's always funny, Rosie Rose, The Bestest Boy, Huon is My Hero, Aldarian Was Right, Averiel, Party Snacks, Norwegianius, Balragius, Hunterus, Bruce W., Artemis, Kira C., Das S., Hunter T., Silver Star, and my name is August West. Thank you so much for your support. All right, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast. If you'd like to learn more about other fantasy worlds, check out my other podcasts, The Elder Scrolls Lorecast, The Witcher Lorecast, and more at robotsradio.net. If you'd like to reach out, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a note on Twitter at robots_radio, or join our amazing community on the Robots Radio Discord. There are links in the show notes, or just search Robots Radio Discord, or find the link on robotsradio.net. I'll see you next time.